Welcome to another Masterclass series hosted by the IAPC&M. To celebrate International Mentoring Day on the 17th of January, today's event, 2 days later, is celebrating mentoring and is bringing together two industry powerhouses, Nikki Wild and Ian Norton, for two masterclasses designed to sharpen your skills and redefine your professional impact. Whether you're a manager striving to be a better role model or a practitioner looking to expand your scope, these sessions will provide the clarity and tools you need. I'm your host, Elena Nedeva, accredited practitioner coach, and I'm so delighted to be here with you all. As a reminder, this masterclass is recorded. To ensure quality of the recordings, please mute your microphones, but keep your videos on. We love to interact. The session today is going to be interactive, so please feel free to unmute yourselves when you would like to ask a question or put it in the chat. I will read it out loud for everyone. You're encouraged to fill in your CPD logs with takeaways and ideas, and in case you don't have a template, I will insert the link to a copy of the IAPC&Ms in the chat box, which you're very welcome to use. So please grab your notepads, sit back, listen, and enjoy. Up first today speaking is Nikki Wild, and she will reveal to us the differences between mentoring and coaching. We are going to explore how coaching and mentoring differ from training, consulting, and counseling, how to clearly communicate and value the value and return on investment of mentoring, how to choose the right approach to different situations. And here is a little bit of information about Nikki. Nikki started her first coaching business back in 2009. She works with executives, high-performing groups, and owners, managed providers of professional services, distressing directors and facilitating teams to play nicely together so that businesses are positive, productive, and profitable. Clients better manage their organizations, their time, and themselves, resulting in clarity, control, and confidence. Back in January 2015, Nikki joined the leadership team of the IAPC&M and is acting their head of business consulting. Without further ado, Nikki, over to you. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you very much for that lovely introduction, Eleanor. It's an absolute pleasure to be back and to be celebrating another mentoring day. It seems to come around ever so quickly. And obviously we had the date 2 days ago, but as a Saturday, we decided that we would celebrate on a weekday. So welcome. This is lovely to be with you all again today. And as Eleanor says, this session for this hour is looking at what is the difference between coaching and mentoring? Because obviously we're celebrating all things mentoring today. And one of the things that I hear very frequently are phrases being used interchangeably to mean one word that we think means one thing being used to describe another. So today, hopefully what you will end up with is some little insights into how you might clearly articulate those differences, so that if you are a coach or a mentor or both, you can describe the differences and be really clear on what it is you're doing with your clients. If you are someone who's looking to engage a coach or a mentor, you know what it is that you actually need, so you get the right provider providing you with the right services. So we'll have a look at those differences and the similarities, and then some little bits and pieces around how to get the most out of a session, whether it's coaching or mentoring, how to choose the right mentor, and what some of the benefits might be of working with a mentor. So we've got a lot to get through, so I hope you've got pens and paper ready, and as Eleanor said at the end, we'll encourage you to make a note of what you have taken away for any CPD logs that you are keeping a note of. So I'm going to screen share. I will, if you want to use the chat, I have got the chat window open as well. So we'll keep an eye on the chat. I think Elena's going to keep an eye on that for me as well. So if I miss any of the questions that come in, we'll pick those up at the end. And we will see what it is. And I've got a little sort of poll question that I'll ask you. Obviously, those of you who are watching us on the live stream on LinkedIn, I won't be able to see your answers, but I'll go and have a look at the recording later and see whether there are any questions in the LinkedIn channel to have a respond to later on. But those of you who are here live with us in the Zoom meeting room, welcome. Lovely to see you all. So I mentioned that we're going to be getting clear on what the differences are between coaching and mentoring, so that we avoid disappointment, so that we don't get people confused, expecting one thing and getting something else. And we're going to make sure, as I said, we're going to make sure we can articulate those differences clearly, um, and think about what the purpose and outcomes and benefits might be. And then we'll talk about how we go about doing that. So, and I'll talk a little bit about the accreditation side of things and certification towards the end. And I will encourage you to update your own action plans. And you have got the option of the notes that I'm going to share with you. I've got in a cheat sheet, so a little sheet, a PDF printout that's available. So that shortcut code, excuse me, excuse me, the bit.ly shortcut code Coach V Mentor 2021 is that sheet. So the things that I'm going to share in a moment on the screenshots are extracts from that sheet. So if you do want to go and get that sheet to refer back to afterwards, you can go on that link and download it. For those who are live in the Zoom meeting, I've put the link in the chat box. If you're watching me on LinkedIn, connect with me on LinkedIn. I can send you the link separately. That'll be easy to do. So why bother defining the difference between coaching and mentoring? As I said earlier on, I find very frequently that the terms get used interchangeably and there are inconsistent definitions. I very often hear people say, I coached my team to be successful. And when we talk about what they actually did, they didn't coach their team, they mentored their team. And so if we are using terms interchangeably, but we don't all understand what we mean by those terms, of course, there is then a mismatch of expectations. There might be confusion about what we actually need. The results will be inconsistent. And of course, what that then leads to is disappointment. People might be disillusioned. I've had people say, oh, coaching doesn't work for me. And that when I've talked to them, actually, they've never experienced coaching. What they've had was mentoring from somebody who perhaps wasn't as effective as they might have been. And if people then, or somebody might have expected to receive some mentoring, and actually what they had engaged was coaching, and then they got frustrated because they weren't getting the mentoring that they wanted. And of course, if that happens, then people will be disinclined to engage further in the future. So it can be really unhelpful to not have a clear meaning behind what coaching and mentoring are. Where are the similarities and where are the differences? And of course, if we have those problems, then it can have all sorts of impacts on the individuals receiving coaching and mentoring, which is my main concern, and also those of us who are providing the services. So one of the things that I also find slightly confusing, and we'll when I get into the differences between coaching and mentoring, there is a sort of grey area, because I've heard people use the analogy of having a sports coach as something. So, for example, those of us who work in executive coaching, sometimes we use the example of elite athletes have their sports coaches, elite executives have their executive coaches. But of course, that's slightly misleading as well, because a sports coach is acting more like a mentor than a coach, because they're giving their input, they're suggesting ways to improve performance. And of course, as coaches, we don't make suggestions. So the phrase coaching in the sports context is actually more aligned to mentoring. So that also can confuse people, which is another reason why, if we as professionals are clear on our definitions of what we mean, we can make those distinctions and make it easy for our coaches, mentees and clients. A little bit about me, for those of you who haven't met me before. As Elena said, I've been part of the IAPC&M leadership team for a long time, well over a decade. And so I know a lot of you will have come across me already. My background as a finance director, I realised when I did my first coaching diploma back in 2008-9, I discovered that I had been mentoring and coaching my team. I just didn't have the words around describing what I was doing. I just thought I was being a good manager. And what I discovered was actually coaching is something that comes very naturally to me, and mentoring to some degree. And so in 2009, when I started my first coaching business, I set out on that mission to de-stress directors and empower their teams to play nicely together. And that I do that through a combination of coaching. Sometimes I'm engaged as a coach. Sometimes I'm engaged as a mentor, sometimes it's a combination of the two, but we're really clear in those engagements which is which. And I've accumulated a number of accreditations and certifications over the years, as well as co-founding a charity where I'm the resident coach and mentor for our charity members. So what I'm sharing with you today is everything I've accumulated over a decade and a half of coaching and mentoring, plus everything that I had accumulated in my old employed roles before that. So I've kind of distilled it all down into hopefully easy to consume summaries. I appreciate that these tables have got quite a lot of information in them, and so that's why I've put them together in that sheet, if you do want that sheet to look at later on. So if we're going to talk about the differences, I think one of the things that can be helpful is to acknowledge that there are a lot of similarities. Mentoring and coaching share a lot of the same skills with training and consulting and counselling as well as each other. So if we are recognizing that when we're having those meetings, we are in a space that's confidential, we're addressing a need, we're hoping that there is a good level of rapport because we've engaged a supplier who works well with us, we're using those empathy skills. There are hopefully good quality questioning and listening skills in those meetings. If we've got those things going on, then it can feel very similar if we're in a coaching session or a mentoring session, or indeed sometimes consulting or training. It can feel that the practitioner or supplier is interchangeable because it's the same skills. If we're doing them well, that we're utilizing those same skills in all of those settings. But of course, there are some really key differences, and that's what we're picking up on today. So I'm going to focus from now on just the differences between coaching and mentoring. Obviously, if we were going to go into training, consulting and counselling and others, then this would be a much, much longer session. So I'm going to keep the focus for now on coaching versus mentoring. So the main central difference, if we didn't have anything else to go on, my key check is there any input coming from the mentor? Or is it purely coming from the client because it's a coaching session? If they are acting as a role model, as the coach, they cannot be a role model because the coach discloses absolutely nothing. We tease everything out from the coachee in a session. Whereas in mentoring, the whole point of choosing that particular mentor is that they've been there, done that, got the t-shirt, as we say. They have walked the path already. And I want to gain the insights, the benefit of their experience. So I choose a mentor who has been where I'm going so that I can share their knowledge, their expertise, their experience, all of that sort of thing. So a mentor will make assessments, will gauge what advice to share or what guidance to share. I've put a question mark for advice because if we're actually telling somebody what to do and giving advice, then we're moving into consulting. Whereas mentoring, we can share experience and share information, share knowledge, but we still expect the mentee to exercise their discretion to choose which bits to use and apply. So for me, there's a kind of a scale between coaching where we give them nothing, through to mentoring where we provide information, through to consulting where we advise and tell them which information to apply. So it's kind of a bit of a scale. Where are we in that? So for me, sort of mentoring sort of sits between coaching and consulting in terms of sharing information, but we're not dictating what information they should take and use. So whilst we will make assessments because we want to know which parts of our history to share with the person we're mentoring, and we will guide them and sort of steer them and say, well, this is the path that I have walked. If you want to join me on that journey, then this is the route to take. But we still trust the client to use their judgment and discernment. And there will be, in the questioning style, this other key difference is there any leading going on in the questioning? So if we are asking leading questions because we've made an assessment about the situation and chosen a question which is going to have some degree of influence on the person sat opposite us, then we've kind of gone into the mentoring territory. Whereas if it is a completely neutral, completely open question where there is no implied direction in the wording we've chosen, really, really clean questioning, then we've probably stayed in the coaching space. So checking in the style of the questions. I've noticed it's been really interesting working with coaches around the globe. There are cultural differences in coaching. And it was one of the things that was absolutely drummed into me when I did my first diplomas, was that pure coaching, so I'll use the phrase pure coaching, gives absolutely no direction or influence to the client. There are no leading questions if we are pure coaching. And I know a lot of the UK training providers are very, very keen to impress that point. What I've also noticed, and I've got a lot of coaches around the world, and particularly in so this is just my experience of my contacts in America and South Africa. They tend to use more leading questions than I have come across in the UK, and it's just a different style of coaching. So whilst I'm sharing with you my insights and my perspective on things, I also acknowledge that pure coaching, if I put that in inverted commas, has a slightly different, potentially a little bit of a straying scope into mentoring in some cultures and some areas. And that's okay if that's what's expected. And as long as we're clear on where the boundaries lie and when are we taking off our coach head and putting on our mentor head. So it's again that's going back to earlier on, and the confusion that can come about through expectation. If we are straying the boundaries or blurring the boundaries between the two, then that can lead to that confusion. So we just need to be aware and be mindful of our questioning style, and are we straying into mentoring? And if we choose to have mentoring as part of our offering, then absolutely fine. But it's useful to be aware of where do we set the boundaries. Similarly, if you are a mentor and you are expected to be sharing your experience, if all you do is coach the person, they're going to get really frustrated because they're expecting you to give them some input. So it's useful to just be mindful of our styles. If we're thinking about the differences between the interventions, then mentoring is going to be tends to focus on specific tasks or for specific areas of experience. If I'm going to engage, if I'm going to look at the whole of life, so if I'm going for life coaching, I'm going to work with a coach. I'm not going for necessarily for life mentoring, because there is no other human being who has exactly the same combination of life experiences that I have. We are all unique individuals. There's a saying that says, be yourself because you can't be anyone else. You can only be you because you are unique. So I'm never going to find a clone of myself to be my mentor. So what we tend to do in mentoring is we choose little sections of what it is we're doing, whether it's work or life or hobbies or whatever. We choose somebody in that more narrow section who has got the experience that we can benefit from. And then we might have a number of different mentors in a number of different areas. So if we play sport, we'll have mentors who can assist us in sport. In work, we might have mentors who are assisting us with our careers. In our hobbies, we might follow somebody. In our social lives, we might have a mentor. So we will probably have multiple people who are acting as mentors, because we will have different people who are specialized in different sections or different areas. And the timeline, which is where one of the similarities is, the timeline is looking where are we now and where do we want to get to. That will be the same for both. And there will be an element of what do we know and how are we applying it, and what action are we taking. The mentoring will be probably focusing a bit more on the application and how are they doing that, and giving perhaps some support and guidance on that. Whereas in coaching, we won't be influencing how is something applied. We're trusting the clients to go and take action, but we might focus a little bit more on how are they showing up each day as they do that. And the purpose of the mentoring and the coaching is very often similar. It's I'm not where I want to get to. I want to get to somewhere else. So how am I going to do that? So it might be performance improvement, might be building up, might be wanting some accountability. Accountability is a key part of coaching. There will be an element of that in mentoring as well. But that difference is that, of course, through mentoring, we're building up our knowledge and skills as well, rather than going away and doing that for ourselves. The session content will be slightly different, because in the mentoring there will be shared examples, whereas in the coaching session there won't be any given examples, because, well, again, we're expecting the client, everything to come from the client. So all answers are teasing out from the client if we have pure coaching, whereas in mentoring, as I said before, the mentor is sharing the benefits of their experience. And the use of past experience is, in mentoring, is coming from the mentor as well as the mentee, whereas in coaching it's only the client's past experience. One of my original diploma trainers said, again, you can tell you've been pure coaching because at the end of the session, coachee knows nothing about you that they didn't know at the start. You've disclosed absolutely nothing about yourself during that session. It's all come from the coachee. Whereas in mentoring, there will be some of that disclosure. And so for the solutions, nothing is prescribed to the coach. The coachee decides what their solutions are, whereas in mentoring, the mentee will be drawing on the mentor's tried and tested solutions, what has worked, and they'll be making their selections from those. And of course, the feel of the sessions might be different. So I've had coachees tell me that coaching has sometimes felt more like therapy. Okay, well, that's a whole other column to deal with. But because it is addressing a lot of internal things, the feel of the session can feel very personal. And sometimes we go much more, so we maybe peel the layers of the individual more deeply in a coaching session, whereas in a mentoring session there's a lot of headspace, there's a lot of thinking, logic, applying, all of that sort of thing. It feels a bit more analytical sometimes in a mentoring session. We can get very personal, we can have some very deep and meaningful conversations in mentoring. My experience is that tends to happen more in coaching than it does in mentoring. So just that feel of the sessions has a slight different vibe to it. I have a quick poll for those of you who are watching us live. I'm curious, have you received, been benefit of, coaching or mentoring, or both, or neither? So if you're able to just quickly put in the chat box, use the chat box to either put MCBN, if you just want to use the initials, save a bit of typing, or you can write them out. I'm curious, have you experienced those? And the most recent mentoring or coaching that you procured, was it through was it as an employee, and so you had an in-house coach or mentor, or as an employee with them engaging somebody externally? Or was it that you privately hired a coach or a mentor? And if so, if you privately hired them, did your employer reimburse you for some of the costs? Or if it's neither, then you haven't procured any coaching or mentoring, so there's no answer to that one. But I'm just curious the different ways that people have engaged coaches and mentors. Just while you're typing your answers, I shared this talk in a company a little while ago, and it was an organization where they were trying to build up a coaching culture, but they already had a mentoring structure in place, and the managers who were the mentors said that they found it really helpful to articulate and manage expectations of their mentees. But it was quite interesting that a lot of the mentees came up to me afterwards and said this was really helpful to understand what to expect from their mentors. And a couple of them had said basically their mentoring sessions in the company where you met for a coffee and had a nice chat, and that was about it. They weren't actually gaining anything from their mentors. And some of the mentors are saying, this is bad because now I've got to live up to these expectations and actually mentor people rather than just meet them for a coffee. So it can be quite a helpful conversation to have if you are mentoring people, just to understand what are the expectations, or what the value could be to each other, both benefiting the mentor as well as the mentee. Thank you very much. So actually, in our meeting today, pretty much all of us have experienced both. And there's been a mixture of using in-house mentors and coaches and privately hired. So all bases are covered today, which is really nice to see. So thank you for your answers to that. Just thought I'd highlight some of the benefits, and a lot of these are common to both coaching and mentoring. And sort of the reasons we think about, the reasons why we might engage a mentor, these are some of the benefits that we're hoping to gauge as a result. So it might be that we want to accelerate the onboarding of new starters. That's in companies. I very often will see a mentor who kind of comes alongside a new recruit to help them find their feet, get used to the place, and build their confidence as they're embedded in their role. It might be to follow up some training or some learning. If I work quite a lot with organisations who've sent their managers or their executives on leadership training courses, and then I come in as the coach and the mentor while they embed what they learned in the training, so they get a much higher return on their investment than just sending them on a training course and then have them forget half of it. So it might be that it's adding value from existing training. It might be nurturing and developing the talent, particularly thinking about succession planning, and encouraging those who might have ambitions to progress in their roles. Or it might be staff retention. If you value your teams and your staff, and investing in their skills isn't just about giving them the tools to do the job, it's investing in them as human beings. And both coaching and mentoring can make them feel valued and assist them as they think about how they develop in their roles. I've worked with quite a lot of teams. When I said I de-stress directors and get teams to play nicely together, this improving relationships goes to the heart of that, because quite often unique human beings have differences of opinion, and we don't always get on. Even with our friends, we don't all get on the whole time. There are times where there are frictions or miscommunications, or the cooperation doesn't work the way it should, or people aren't as collaborative as we might like. So very often both coaching and mentoring are brought in to address those things, and can be really effective in those situations. And then for the individuals, strengthening that mental resilience. We do a lot of work behind the scenes with individuals who are who are looking for somebody who's an ally, a friendly person who can come alongside them, who's not involved directly in whatever the situation is. We don't have any emotional attachment to what the client, the mentee or the coachee is going through. So we can be a much more neutral support to them. It might be about increasing productivity. We set some goals, set some objectives, set some targets, giving that focus, maintaining momentum. I mentioned accountability is a key part of that. And that, of course, means that we do see people achieve their goals. It's not just a nice to have wish list. It becomes something that is a certainty, that is delivered, that is measured, that is moved on from. And what I've noticed is that with both coaching and mentoring, my clients get their outcomes faster, more easily, and more effectively than if I just left them to drift along as they were before. I've picked up some stats from some of the studies that have been over the years. And I love that this return on investment, I mentioned about embedding learning to get a return on investment, but the study to quantify the value of companies who engaged coaching made 86% of companies said that they could calculate and make at least their initial investment. So coaching or mentoring basically pays for itself, is what this is saying. The value of what they get as a result is at least the same as what they paid in the first place, and then some. 19% said it was 50 times the investment. So if a fifth of the people you speak to make 50 times, if you charge them $1,000 and they're going to make $50,000 worth of value as a result of the coaching, that's quite a good return. Another third of the people, nearly or over a quarter, said it was between 10 and 49 times the investment. And the average was 7 times the investment. So again, if you charge an individual $1,000 for a small coaching program, and that's worth $7,000 to them, then that is a really good return on investment. My clients, I measure their team effectiveness, and it's about a 33%, about a third improvement. That's on average in 15-16 years. So if I'm working with a team and they go at least a third, if they can improve their effectiveness, then that is, you think about how much value, how much better the team is going to perform. And the reason I've got a box of apples there is because it is not always easy to predict what the outcomes and benefits are going to be, particularly something intangible like coaching and mentoring, unless we're actually setting goals that have got a measurable, an easy to measure target. But I use the analogy that it's like the orchard. If you imagine, so at the moment we're recording this in January, and so in springtime, in a few months, a few weeks' time, hopefully, we'll see the blossoms on the apple trees. I've got some local apple trees, and we'll see the blossoms coming out, and we know that in this apple orchard, if we just leave it to nature, come autumn, we will get a harvest of apples. We'll have a box of apples at the end of the season. But if we apply like coaching and mentoring is to people in the apple orchard, it's like I'm going in and I'm pruning the trees, I'm making sure the trees are healthy, I'm fertilizing them, making sure it's a good quality soil, we're weeding to make sure the weeds don't choke the plants. If we go in and we look after and nurture our trees, then we're going to get a much better harvest of apples in the autumn than if we just leave nature to take its course. I don't know how many apples I'm going to get. I can't specify or guarantee that we're going to get a certain quantity of apples, but I know that if I look after my orchard, it's going to be more fruitful than if I just leave it. And coaching and mentoring, I use this analogy because I feel that coaching and mentoring is very similar. It's like the season, the growing season is like the coaching or mentoring program. And I know we're going to get a better harvest at the end of the program than if we just left people to their own devices. I can't necessarily guarantee or quantify what that will be, but what we will do at the end of the program is we'll count the apples in whatever way the clients are measuring their progress for their mentoring or coaching. That's like the equivalent of counting apples. So we will see how big their harvest is, and hopefully they've got some nice juicy fruit at the end of the program. I mentioned that one of the things that it's useful for is talent development programs. So if you're working with people who have a performance program or a system of objective setting, for example, then coaching and mentoring works really nicely alongside that, because we can embed some of the targets. But where I talk, the trio of things here, I've got the combination of the technical knowledge. So if we're sending people on training courses to learn the technical skills of how to do the job, we've got the interpersonal skills, the relationships, how do we get along with our colleagues? But those two things are no good unless we've got the mindset to apply it. And a lot of the coaching and mentoring is working with the mindset as well as the skill set. Mentoring will address the skill set as well, whereas pure coaching is just working with the client's mindset and how are they going to apply the skills that they've sourced elsewhere. Very often in that talent development program, the mentor will be a manager or a peer or a colleague, might be an external mentor. So I will often act as their external mentor because they want somebody who's a bit more detached for some reasons. But if it is very specific mentoring within the organization, then it will be someone from in the organization. Whereas the coach is completely independent of the coachee. The more independent we are, the easier it is to not stray into mentoring and giving advice and guidance. So it's actually easier if we are much more independent. So I'll very often work with organizations where they've got an in-house mentoring team, but they use external independent coaches to get that level of detachment and a different perspective on things. So we can have bespoke arrangements, we can complement existing programs, and of course the whole point is that we get the maximum value for the coachees and mentees that are going through them. Oh, excuse me. If we're going to choose the best coach or mentor for ourselves, we can use everything I've shared with you before up till now can be used as a bit of a checklist to find out, to ask people how do they tend to approach coaching or mentoring, and then as you're listening to them, you're sort of checking off against your list. Are they describing coaching? Are they describing mentoring? But there are also things that we will want to check. So things like what professional development does the individual engage with? Are they professionally accredited? So IAPC&M, obviously we accredit both coaches and mentors, and I'll come back to that in a moment. So we want to check their accreditation status, their credentials. We want to check, as part of that, do they undergo their own CPD, continuous professional development? So are they developing their own skills still? We want to check what other results have they had. We'll want to check their credibility. I put together many years ago, in fact, when I first started my first coaching business, I wrote a checklist of 10 questions to ask a coach or a mentor before hiring them, because it's a bit of a sort of sneaky marketing thing for those of you who are doing this, because obviously you're only going to put on their questions that you could answer yes to yourself. Excuse me. So I've just put the example, that link to my website I've just shared in the chat for those of you who might want to go and see my example. So part of it is things that I will obviously say yes to. Yes, I have all of these things in place. But actually, I want my clients to be asking those questions. If they're choosing whether they work with me or another coach or mentor, I want them to have considered these options, taken these considerations into account before they've made their selection. So we're going to be asking about their skills, their credentials. We're going to be thinking about, are they internal or external, if this is an organization. We want to find their experience and their level of objectivity. But we also want to understand their why. What's the outcome and purpose? And it is interesting that nearly half of coaches and coachees find their coaches through referrals and word of mouth. I don't have the same stat for mentoring, but but if we think about coaching and mentoring, and that there are a lot of similarities, I imagine that the number is going to be at least similar, if not higher, for mentoring. And of course, if people are using referrals and word of mouth to introduce people, then in some ways that's quite nice, because our networks then become those sources of people who can pass our names on. And everybody we have worked with as a mentor in the past, we can then ask them, who else should I be talking to? Who else would benefit from some mentoring in this area? Have you got a colleague who might also benefit? Or a contact? Or if it's coaching, again, who do you think I should be having a conversation with about the coaching? So that word of mouth chain can be really nice. And I mentioned that we're checking the credentials. So absolutely, yes, there is such a thing as professional accreditation for coaches and mentors. When I go to business networking events, I quite often ask that question. Did you know that there is professional accreditation? And the vast majority of people, certainly those who've never met me before, say, I didn't realise that. And I ask them, would you engage an accountant without checking whether they're accredited and qualified with one of the accountancy bodies? They say, well, no, of course, I make sure I've got a reputable accountant. So why would you choose a coach or a mentor who isn't accredited? Why would you work with somebody who's not been verified, given the importance of the coaching and mentoring that you want to engage with? So I really encourage people to ask questions about credentials, certification, and accreditation. And I also explain to them the differences, because again, they don't know the difference. I've heard people say they're accredited when they're only certified. And so certification is a snapshot in time. Usually we've finished a training course of some description, and we've got a certificate to say that on that date we have completed the work to the required standard, and we've achieved a certain attainment level at that point in time. So a certificate is a snapshot in time. It's confirming, the third party has confirmed that we've reached the required standard. So I am a certified in DISC. I'm a certified business coach. I'm a certified NLP practitioner, certified coach, and certified facilitator. So I've got lots of things where, and for example, my diploma in personal performance coaching, I was certified with a diploma with distinction. So I've got lots and lots of certificates in my folder that have said at various points in time I've trained and achieved certain standards. But those tell us at that point, that's where we were up to. What's happened subsequently? Nobody knows. The training provider doesn't know what I've done when I've finished the training course. So that's where accreditation comes in. And a professional accreditation is an ongoing status. So an accreditation body has the authority to check the competence, and yes, they're checking the attained standards. And usually there's a requirement for ongoing experience, that continuous professional development, to maintain the standards, to keep the skills up to date, to keep the knowledge up to date. We hope that there is some degree of supervision. So those of us who are professionals have somebody we can turn to talk through how we are operating to make sure that our capability is maintained. So in addition to all of those certificates in the folder, I am accredited by the IAPC&M at both a fellow coach level and fellow mentor level. And that accreditation is maintained through the ongoing training and development that I do. I'm accredited by the Coaching Academy in my DISC training and my NLP. And Brian, as one of Brian's senior practitioners in goal mapping, and those ongoing training and development are verified through updates and ongoing training and so on. So I keep adding certificates into my folder as part of maintaining that accreditation. So when I'm engaging a coach or a mentor for myself, one of my questions to them, as well as their experience and their credentials, is which of their credentials are certificated and which of their credentials are accredited, to see whether it's the snapshot in time or the ongoing development and capability. So when we are thinking about working with professional mentors, very often there is qualification by experience, QBE. And a lot of mentors are qualified by experience. There are a lot who probably don't even know that they could be professionally accredited as mentors. I'm spreading the word as I can, but there will be some who didn't even know that was a thing. So a lot of mentors are chosen because they have the experience. They are qualified by experience. They've walked the path already. So that is, again, a useful distinction to be aware of. Am I engaging somebody because I want to benefit from their experience, but they haven't been professionally accredited? Or am I choosing somebody who is accredited and hopefully has the relevant experience as well? I mentioned I would touch on getting the most out of a session. This is useful to know whether we are the providers of the session or the recipients. So if we are the coachee or the mentee, we want to show up knowing what it is we want to work on. We want to decide the focus. I'm sure, like me, you've had people come to a session and then you said, so what is it you want to cover today? And they go, I don't know, I've been really busy, I haven't really thought about it. So we hope that they have given it some consideration. I'm just making a mental note because I've got a session with my coach in about an hour's time. I'm just thinking I haven't actually completely decided what we're going to work on today. So I need to go and be my own instruction there to go and get some focused decisions. And also start with the end in mind. What is the desired outcome from that meeting, that coaching or that mentoring meeting? We want some method of recording what's going on. If we're going to refer back to it, we want to know which action we're taking. We need to have some record, some method of keeping some notes. One of the useful things these days, now that we've got AI, when I use Zoom meetings, the AI function, which will record the session for me, is actually doing a pretty good job. I've been quite impressed. It's not foolproof, so we still have to edit it and maintain it, but it is becoming an easier way of capturing the session, so we can just have the conversation in the session and then use the AI transcript at the end for note recording. But obviously if you're sitting in a meeting with somebody in person and you don't have any recording facilities, then that's not going to work. But just a little aside on recording, please don't hit record without getting permission from the other person first, because it's just from an ethical point of view, we need to make sure that data protection and all of that sort of thing is covered. That's a whole other session. And keeping a journal or a record of progress between sessions. If you can refer to that the day before you meet have your next coaching or mentoring session, and reflect on what's been working, how have things been going, then that also can then inform what you do next. So useful things from the preparation, and then in the session we want to turn up open-minded, be prepared to be challenged, and expecting change. If we're going to go from where we are now to somewhere else, those two things are different, so something is going to have to change. So we need to expect change to happen as a result. And of course, there is a before, a during, and after. There is that preparation. There is that mindset during. There is also some follow-up to do to make the most of the sessions, to put into practice the actions that we have taken from the session. Which brings me to action plan. So for those of you who are watching this live, I'm going to invite you to use the chat to think about what is your main takeaway from this. So what are the things you want to remember about what I have shared with you so far that you might want to take away. And while you're doing that, maybe think about any questions that you want to ask about how you're going to apply what I have shared with you today. So if you think about what you've got coming up for the rest of today, over the rest of this week, we've got this live session on a Monday, so we've got the rest of the week ahead of us. And in the rest of this month or in the next coming few weeks, what action are you going to take today, this week, in the next month or so to make the most of being here today? We want your return on investment to be valuable. So how are you going to make sure that that is the case? By putting something into practice, using something that you've taken from this session. And as I said, if you want to share something in the chat, what are the takeaways that you're going to remember for yourself? The reason I do that is because we know that if we've typed it into the chat, we're more likely to remember it than if we just think we will. We all do this. In my brain, I'm sure I'm going to remember everything. And of course, we step away and then we get distracted and we don't remember everything. And if you've if you've typed it into the chat, you can copy and paste it then into your CPD log. So you've killed two birds with one stone. Thank you. We've got explaining to clients the differences between coaching and mentoring, and most of your clients look for direction advice. Oh, cool. So if you're recognizing that's what they're asking you for, you know where that is different between, or the difference between coaching and mentoring, to know that you can have that conversation. The apple garden analogy, yeah. Using that as a way of, if we're having a conversation and clients are saying, what are the results? Well, so that can be a nice analogy. I can ask them what's their version of the apple orchard and how are they going to measure their apples? How are they going to count their apples? And clients can come up with their own measure. If it's in a business, then it might be a commercial measure. If we're coaching the sales team, they might be measuring the sales. That's a really easy one to measure. If it's my team effectiveness, I get them to come up with a score out of 10 at the start of how effective would they say their team is today, and they have in their minds what their own scale looks like on that. If the team's absolutely performing at its best, and then performing at all, and then somewhere in between, where is it when we start? And then I check in with them at the end as a check, going back to their original scale, where they started from, where are they now, and how much closer are they to their own 10 out of 10? And that's how I gauge that 33% improvement, because I take an average of what all the teams' scores out of 10 are at the start and the end, and I look. Hopefully it always goes up. So sometimes it doesn't go up very much. Sometimes it goes up a huge amount. But on average, we look at where is that increasing, so the clients can work out their own pull measures. Nice comments there about had an idea of the difference between coaching and mentoring, but this has given a bit more detail for consideration, or a lot more details. Curious about gaining accreditation and mentoring, because the sessions are both. Yeah, and we do at the IAPC&M, we have separate accreditation for coaching and mentoring, but we also have a combined, where we recognise that a lot of coaches are also providing mentoring, or vice versa. We've got a combined accreditation where we can, to save duplicating a lot of the effort, we can do a joint accreditation for both coaching and mentoring, if that's appropriate. So if that is something that is of consideration, it's going to add credibility to your provider, the provision of your services, then you can get in touch at the IAPC&M, and we can direct you to the resources about accreditation, or we can have a chat with you live, so we can share those contact details. So, action plans. Have you all got something written down that you are going to do as a result of being here? And if you do want to keep in touch, you can hunt me down on LinkedIn. I am Nikki Wild, as said. All my social media is at Wild Empowerment, so that's an easier way of hunting me down. But you can connect on LinkedIn if you would like to. Obviously, you can find us at the IAPC&M as well, and the leadership team here are always happy to hear from people. I'm going to take it off the screen share, and we've got 10 minutes for Q&A. So I'm wondering what question, while you've got access to us here, what question might you want to ask about what we've covered today, or coaching and mentoring and the differences. So you can either unmute yourselves or raise the hand, or if your microphone's not functioning, then we've obviously got the chat box as well. So what questions might there be? It's gone quiet. I can't believe that there isn't a single question.
I have a question actually, Nikki, so I can go first, if I may. I've recently come across some. Have you come across parts work?
Parts work, as in neuro-linguistic programming, NLP parts work,
as in,
something else.
IFS, which is the it's a therapy, therapy which was developed by Richard Schultz. So it's a very popular form of therapy.
Okay.
So and I wanted to inquire, because in therapy, the facilitator often guides the client. From your perspective, is therapy and coaching compatible?
Definitely compatible. They are definitely different. I have worked with clients who've been receiving therapy at the same time as they're having coaching. So sometimes somebody will engage with therapy, and then once they've concluded whatever that therapeutic intervention is, they then come for coaching to kind of set themselves some future focus for what comes next once they've concluded the therapy. So I know a lot of therapists who have then accredited as coaches as well, to offer that as an ongoing sort of next step, if you like. Once their therapy clients have concluded, they've gone, this is follow on way of working, because quite often we've built up a relationship and the clients want to carry on working with us, but they go, but I finished the therapy, but I don't want to stop working with you. So well, actually you could engage in some professional coaching to look forward, look future, set some nice new goals, whatever it is, to build on where they've got to. So I know quite a lot of therapists who have trained as coaches as well and have got that accreditation alongside it. I have also worked with people who are working with a therapist, and they've decided to have coaching concurrently. And in that situation, it's involved a very sensitive conversation up front to understand what is going on with the therapy, where coaching, is it appropriate that the coaching happens alongside that if the two things are happening at the same time. And usually what happens is the client gives me permission to talk to the therapist. So the two of us can discuss what we are doing in the sessions. So you've kind of got a three-way relationship between the therapist, the client, and the coach, so that we from a professional ethics point of view, we make sure that what we are doing is complementary. We're not kind of pulling the client in different directions, because obviously the whole point of the two engagements is that they are both supporting the client and kind of knitting together quite nicely. So it can work. It needs, as I say, it needs, again, it's that clarity of where are the boundaries, what are we providing in each of the interventions, is the client getting the appropriate assistance in that moment for whatever it is that they're dealing with, and is it counselling, therapy, goes all of those columns that I had on the screen at the start. What exactly is it the client looking to achieve, and what's the most appropriate way for them to do that? But I definitely think they can be complementary, and it can work quite nicely for the clients.
Thank you so much for explaining.
It's a good example.
Yes, there is a question.
Yeah, so the question is, can you shift between coaching and mentoring in a session? And do you have to be clear with the client about that? The first answer, my short answer, is yes, you can. And there may be times when that's appropriate. I would come back to how have you set up the arrangement at the start? Because if the original contracting has been for pure coaching, even though your instincts might be, this is a real brick wall. And if the client just doesn't know what they don't know, or they've got the no amount of elegant, skilled questioning is going to tease the answer out of the client because it's just not in there because they've just never had this experience. And therefore, some mentoring may assist them to move a step forward. Even if that is our instinct, in the moment, they've engaged us for pure coaching. So we have to sort of sit on our hands, bite our tongues, resist the temptation to start steering or guiding the client. Um, if we are sensing that coaching isn't what they need and they need some mentoring, then I would be quite clear about that and say, look, I know we've engaged on a pure coaching basis. I'm sensing this. Is that, and I would check in with the client, is what I'm sensing matching what they're experiencing? And because it might not be, they might be absolutely loving the coaching, and that's fine. Similarly, if we are engaged on a purely mentoring arrangement, it might be that the client actually would benefit from more coaching. If it's going from coaching to mentoring, I think we are more prescriptive about pausing, checking in with the client, highlighting that we're taking off our coach head and putting on our mentor head, or vice versa. Um, I think if we're in a mentoring situation and we're asking coaching questions, that tends to happen more naturally because the style of the mentoring session, we're already expecting to be giving some input and guidance. So I think slipping from mentoring into coaching tends to happen more seamlessly. But if we're going from coaching into mentoring, we need to check the boundaries a bit more closely. But in both directions, it's a case of what's the contracting that's been put in place, what is the client expecting of us, and are we straying away from that expectation and the brief? Because going back to what I said at the start about if those two things blur and the expectation is to get one thing and they get something different, we can end up with dissatisfaction, disillusion, frustration. Oh, it didn't work. Whereas actually it did work. It's just that what worked was something different from what they actually wanted in the first place. And quite often what I find is that I might be brought in for a mentoring arrangement, and then just in the same way as Elena was saying about therapy, then adding on some coaching, I'll quite often do some mentoring and then have some ongoing coaching to assist the client while they implement and take action, and so carry on walking the path with them. So I'll quite often end up coaching them in more broad things than just the thing that was the initial mentoring. Or I'll be brought in as an executive coach, and there may be some elements of mentoring that I get invited to deliver as well once we explore the scope of what they initially think they want. Because I quite often find with clients, they think they want one thing, and then when we start exploring that, we start in a we don't know what we don't know situation, and as we start to uncover things and peel the layers of the onion back and all of that lovely stuff that we do either as coaches or mentors, we quite often discover that there is more to what they're looking for than just the initial conversation highlighted. So quite often we will get to that point. But with all of these things, if you are shifting between coaching and mentoring in a session, going back to the original question, do you have to be clear with the client? I would say yes would be my preferred position on that, just to avoid any confusion or any risk of disillusion or dissatisfaction later on. If you've been clear with them, then and you can do it really gently and without breaking the rapport or without breaking the mood or the flow of the session. And I think that comes from you being really clear in your mind what you do and where are the boundaries, so that if you do step from one to the other, it's just a natural thing to mention. But I quite often in my coaching agreements or in my intake meetings when I'm going through how
I think we lost Nikki for a bit. Can everyone else hear me? I will message her to see how she's getting on coming back. While we are waiting, wanted to ask you, do you have plans to join Ian's masterclass later today in about an hour?
I'm not sure I'm going to be able. I'm not sure yet.
Okay. And you, Rachel?
Yes, I'm hoping to join. I think it'll be really helpful because I am getting slightly confused with, I think I'm definitely bringing both of them into my sessions, coaching and mentoring. I don't think I'm able to separate it just because of the line of the work that I do. So, yeah, I'm finding these very, very beneficial.
That's great feedback. Thank you for joining. And here is Nikki. She's back. Hi, Nikki. You're mute.
Mute, that would be helpful, wouldn't it? Sorry about that. My internet dropped, and usually I have the phone set up as a hotspot as a backup, and the hotspot had turned itself off at the same time, so that wasn't helpful. So do apologise. I shall go and have words with the internet provider. So hopefully I've answered all the questions that were there in the chat. My part of losing the meeting and coming back means that I've now lost the chat box because it won't show me everything previously to joining the meeting, so I have to rely on Elena.
There are no additional
But I think
questions.
we're at the point where we were going to wrap up and get everyone to put in their CPD.
Yes. So thank you so much for sharing your contact details with us, Nikki. We all know how to reach out. It's been an incredibly useful session for all of us, packed with knowledge. And thank you for actually putting that seed into our minds about what is the one action we want to take going forward. I personally found that really useful. So thank you. And we look forward to the pleasure of welcoming you again in the near future. Thank you so much for everyone that attended as well. Hopefully you will be able to join our next masterclass with Ian, who is also going to be focusing on coaching and mentoring and sharing his wisdom with us and useful experience. Have a great rest of the day, everyone. Take care.